I wanted to talk a little bit about our presentation. This paper is a collaborative effort by Pallavi Kaligi.
Is facilitating advanced manufacturing technicians' readiness in the rural economy, a competency-based deductive approach. Thank you so much, and please, it's all yours.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for coming today. Great discussion so far. I wanted to talk a little bit about our presentation. This paper is a collaborative effort by Pallavi Kaligi, Priyanka Prajapati, which are our recently graduated research assistants, Dr. Marsha Martis, Professor and Associate Dean of Research, and me, Faye Jones, faculty researcher, all of us from Florida State University and the College of Communication and Information. Our research question is aimed to answer the following questions. How do national AM competency levels in the DOL AM competency model compare to competency levels expressed by Northwest Florida employers? And then the second question, what competencies most critical to rural AM employers can benefit entry-level technicians through classroom learning and experiential learning? This study utilized multiple methods and a deductive approach. First, we looked at or used natural language processing to review DOL AM competencies, the 2020 version that came out, to extract competency levels, which we consider verbs, and topics, nouns, right? We analyzed the verbs using Bloom's taxonomy and analyzed verbs and nouns using the DOL AM competency model tiers. We then interviewed 10 AM industry employers in rural manufacturing plants in Northwest Florida and asked them to identify the most essential competencies for entry-level technicians. So data analysis. For this paper, we broke competencies into two main categories. The first being competencies taught in classrooms, which refer to competencies in Bloom's taxonomy in levels 1 through 3, and then classroom competencies with experiential learning components as well, which are through Bloom's taxonomy levels 4 through 6. So AM competencies are developed by the Employment and Training Administration of the U.S. Department of Labor. The industry subject matter and technical experts provide feedback on the model, and the model is validated with input from the industry associations, labor organizations, educators, and other subject matter experts. The ETA and the partners recently updated that 2010 model that we discussed with the 2020 to represent competencies across a wide range of AM industries, and is meant to allow new AM technician educators and employers the ability to basically align those competencies, or what we know of as knowledge, skills, and abilities, and also facilitate recruitment, retention, training, and development in AM. Now, the summary of changes document that we've also seen, some of you may have seen that posted from the 2010 and 2020 models, do not appear to be that significantly different from the 10-year span. And so the major topic themes or tiers are pretty much as you see here listed. There are 4 tiers, tier 1 being personal effectiveness skills, and those cover things such as interpersonal skills, integrity, professionalism, initiative, dependability, some of those things that we know of as soft skills, right? Tier 2 cover academic competencies. Those are our reading, writing, and arithmetic type of competencies, right? But also science, communication, critical and analytical thinking, and basic computer skills. Tier 3 cover the workplace, broader workplace competencies, so business fundamentals, teamwork, customer focus, scheduling, coordinating, creative thinking, problem solving, etc. Some of those also have a lot of soft skill attributes as well, but again, more general competencies. And then Tier 4, which are called industry-wide technical competencies. Those cover things that we see more in those core courses like manufacturing process design and development, operations management, maintenance, installation, repair, production, the supply chain, quality assurance, process equipment, health, safety, environment, and those types of skills. Now, as shown in this figure, a comparison of the DOL-AM competency model with rural employers' stated needs for entry-level employers revealed several differences between verb levels. DOL-AM competencies showed the greatest percentage of action verbs in the applying category, 37%, followed by understanding, then remembering, creating, and analyzing, and also then finally evaluating at the end. If you look at the vertical chart, the two verb categories with the highest variance or unique verbs were remembering and applying. Now, rural employers identified remembering verbs the most, followed by applying, understanding, creating, and evaluating, and then analyzing. The greatest variances here we're seeing in the remembering and understanding categories, meaning they had a more of a diverse group of verbs that they use within those categories. Now, with natural language processing revealing that 26.35 of the verbs in the DOL competency model were higher level verbs, a subsequent review was conducted to identify the specific competencies, the verbs and topics in the document. So competencies with high level verbs in the DOL-AM competency model were classified as follows. Now, on the table, you'll see high level verbs. Those are, levels 4, 5, and 6, as we discussed, horizontally, and tiers displayed vertically, and how the verbs fit then within those crosstabs is what you see displayed. The review of the competencies identified create verbs as most frequently mentioned when analyzing by taxonomy and tiers at the upper level, followed by analyze and evaluate verbs. The appendix that you'll find in the paper shows these competencies with verbs that were assigned to a higher level category. Tiers that were not assigned, this is very important, that were not assigned to a category were either verbs in levels 1 through 3, right? Because we were looking at higher level as opposed to what we considered a lower level or simply classroom. Because possibly they had problematic verbs that could not be classified, or not scored because they did not have a verb to classify, so poor sentence structure. Verb issues included words such as use or have, which are not action verbs that can be applied with Bloom's taxonomy well. What do you mean by the word use? Is it that you want someone to apply it, or that you want someone to build it, right? So a little bit more depth is needed as we categorize our competencies. So example of competencies not scored because they were not properly structured were written competencies such as hot and cold forming process, right? Hot and cold forming process, whereby there was no verb to classify the statement. So here you have a topic without a verb. So it should be noted that only in Tier 4 or in the industry-wide technical competencies where there are many topics listed without the appropriate action verbs to properly classify in a Bloom's level category. So this is critical, right, as we're developing curricula, but also as we're seeking and looking to align our curricula with DOL competency models, for example, in industry, and what perhaps industry might think is important, because we don't have that precise measure without the level of the competency. So for rural employers, higher level competencies, we reviewed employer transcripts for evidence of the 16.05% of those higher level verbs identified by the NLP processing or NLP technique that we use. But there again were few surprising findings. Although we knew that employers used few high-level verbs, we did not know that most were based in Tier 4 again, and particularly in the AM competency model that could not be scored, right? So for example, one employer said that a powertrain specialist is going to build transmissions and torque converters, whereas mechanical power transmission systems maintenance, installation, and repair was listed in the AM competency model, right, as a topic, again, without a verb that could not be scored nor compared. In this example, maintenance and installation to NLP are considered nouns that would not pick up as verbs for comparison. So there were also an abundance of words used, again, with the create category, which were removed from the study for AM competency model purposes and thus removed from the employer analysis. And with the challenges identified, we decided to further analyze the higher level competencies found only in the AM competency model, just as a starting point for supplementing instruction in AM rural programs through experiential learning, and report those for this paper. So we quickly learned that competency analysis is only as valuable as the relevance and write-up of the competencies themselves. So how do national AM competency levels in the DOL AM competency model compare? And so here we're looking at that first research question to those levels expressed by the Northwest Florida employers. So the DOL AM competency model contains 74% of verbs in lower categories, right? Levels 1 through 3. Those are remember, understand, and apply. And the Bloom's taxonomy of 26% of verbs in higher levels, levels 4 to 6, which are analyze, evaluate, and create verbs. In the remembering category, rural employers had over double the AM competency model verbs in that category. However, DOL AM competency model had a greater percentage in all other verb categories. For rural employers, they were scored towards also the lower level verbs, 84%, than the higher level, 16%, although all the differences could be attributed to the remembering category. This suggests that developers of AM competency model and rural employers who participated in this study either believe that the lower level competencies are most needed by entry-level technicians, or higher level competencies were not given as much consideration during the development process. It can also mean that rural employers are not as experienced in articulating verb levels for competency development. And this is important, right, as we're trying to align what we do in the classroom to what happens in industry or the needs as students progress from one level to another. The most frequently used verbs in the DOL AM competency model were in the applying category, 37%, and understanding, 20%, while remembering and applying were highest among employers, suggesting that applying verbs were among the most frequently mentioned verbs in both the AM competency model and by rural employers. And remember, applying is level 2, level 3. So that applying is level 3. So with this study focusing on competencies that might complement formal learning through an experiential learning component, an argument can be made that applying category level 3 should belong to higher level verbs and that lower level verbs should only include levels 1 and 2. However, if this is the case, then it might also be that applying verbs are being used synonymously with create verbs, right? Or that the higher level verbs are not being used sufficiently in manufacturing, which by definition involves the creation of things. So something to kind of think about as we explore curriculum development, as we look at standards, as we look at these competencies overall. So let's look at question 2. Of course, now you see that we were not able to look at rural employers because of the fact that so many of the competencies were in Tier 4 and that many of those had the word used and or didn't have a specific verb attached. But we do present findings from the AM competency model and how we can now begin to look at competencies to basically identify areas where experiential learning might also supplement instruction. So let's see here. Although we didn't use the rural employer transcripts due to the problematic issues we encountered, again, we did look at high-level competencies in the model as a starting point. Tier 1, it covers personal effectiveness competencies and includes 4 level 6 competencies, which focus on adapting and modifying behavior based on feedback, self-analysis, or past mistakes. The interpretation of verbal and nonverbal behavior of others, such as level 5, and anticipation of changes in work demands, level 4, and are also included in this tier. Now, the use of soft skills can certainly be developed using experiential learning concepts, which may not be as highly integrated in curricula, but necessary in the AM profession. Tier 2 covers academic competencies and contains 12 analyzing verbs, level 4, 8 evaluating, and 5 creating. Verbs that focus on analysis, example, infer, detect, analyze, distinguish, conclude, and compare, are mostly seen in topics such as mathematics, logic and reasoning, drawing conclusions from information, etc. Evaluate verbs, 8 of them, involve topics of time, temperature, distance, evaluation of data, controls, and sources of error. Competencies that involve create verbs such as compose, solve, and create often include composition of documents, which I thought was interesting, creation of presentations, and solving problems or issues. On-the-job training, internships, field experiences, and apprenticeships, they may be beneficial for development of academic competencies in real workplace settings. So Tier 2 has the highest number of high-level verbs in the AM competency model and also the highest number of verbs in the analyze category, suggesting that there may be many opportunities within this tier to expand the learning of academic competencies through experiential learning. Tier 3 focuses on workplace competencies and contains the greatest number of create level 6 verbs. That is, if we don't consider those structural areas that we talked about in the model, and focus on developing relationship with others, planning work, developing contingency plans, designing systems, compiling information or data, developing alternatives, improving efficiency. Evaluate verbs, level 5 and tier 3, involve prioritizing, estimating, evaluating, and assessing outcomes, and focus on the relative merits of solutions, consequences of actions, the importance of criticality of problems, but also resources needed for project completion. Analyzing level 4 verbs are also high in tier 3, and they target the need to anticipate the future needs of customers, anticipate obstacles, anticipate problems. You'll see anticipate a lot there, and discover new ways to add value to the team and organization, and of course anticipate again and prevent work-related injuries. So workplace competencies, which had the second highest number of high-level verbs in the AM competency model, is likely to be conducive to experiential learning, given that these competencies may be difficult to simulate in a classroom environment overall. And then finally, tier 4 includes the industry-wide competencies, and it has the second highest number of create verbs, but probably the highest if we look at those unscored topics, 284 of them again, just to remind everyone. And tier 4 competencies focus on the manufacturing process, design, development, and the continuous improvement of the AM process to ensure products meet customer needs. So verbs used most frequently are design, create, and develop, right, level 6, with topics involving the production of support systems, developing corrective actions, delivering schedules, and supplier networks and control systems. This was undoubtedly the tier with the most incomplete competencies as well, which likely also has the greatest applicability to the AM workforce and experiential learning potential for students. So to wrap up, I just wanted to highlight a few future research items. Perhaps we should, in the future, look to explore a systematic way to create and improve competency creation in verb and levels and tiers. And of course, this would include use of verbs and structural competencies. Next, we might want to identify techniques, right, to evaluate whether competency development mirrors the needs of academia and industry when desired. Perhaps a BOC, right, a body of knowledge in AM that incorporates the views of AM educators, practitioners, policymakers, with the assistance, right, of an HR or curriculum specialist that allows us to actually align, ensure that we understand the verbs and the levels of those verbs that we're using. Collection of data for AM competency development based on multiple sources, right? Interviews, surveys, sorting exercises with employers, right? With academic professors, etc., with competencies at the appropriate level and again, measurable, right? And then, of course, establish a system with competency development to then identify experiential learning opportunities within those competencies. So again, thank you for attending the presentation today. Feel free to contact us or ask any questions here on chat. Thank you.